Laughter is the only thing that'll keep you sane. And this world is crying more and more every day. Don't let evil get you down in this madness spinning round and round. I want you to live forever underneath the sky so blue. I want you to live forever underneath the sky so blue.
Well, hey, good morning. Oh, there's like one person awake over here. Hello. Hello, everybody. How's everyone doing? We feeling awake this morning? Are we excited about helping the next gen win? That side's excited. This side, not so much today. Hey. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Morgan. I'm married to Kelly. We've got 2 kids, Taylor and Laken. Taylor is about 6 or what's the age today? 15. She's like 9 or 8 days away from turning 6. She is so excited. She is like freaking out. Staying up at night and planning her Elsa bike party, which is going to be a heck of a lot of fun. And my other daughter is 3 and a bit, 3.5, and she loves to read books at the moment, which is amazing. And this morning I was preparing for today, and they keep running in and out, and she keeps saying to me, "Daddy, would you play a game with me? Daddy, would you play a game with me?" And it's so hard to be able to say, "I can't because I've got to come and speak here this morning." But we have a date, and we're going to go play a game in a little bit when I get home. So that's going to be a whole lot of fun. Hey, we love helping the next gen win. And we're talking about this series. And if you didn't join us last week, I need to give you a little recap because today is kind of like a continuation from last week. Last week we kicked off this series and we started this great series. But one of the things I'm just going to do is just connect these 2 little speakers because they're making some funny noises. Saving volunteers time. How's that? There we go. What we did is we kicked off the series last week, helping the next gen win, and we try to get some things going and trying to start defining a few things. But why a recap from last week to this week is important is because today is kind of like part 2, kind of like a follow-on, a continuation through to what is happening this morning. What we did is we started off by defining things. We said that this series, even though it's the next gen win, it's not just for parents. It's for every single one of us, whether you're a parent, whether you're a coach, whether it be life on the sports field, whether you are a mentor to someone, whether you're a leader on a team, you're in a project, you're leading something in life, if you're an aunt, an uncle, a grandparent, maybe a godparent, this is for you. It's every single one of us, because each and every one of us, as we defined from last week, we said that helping the next gen win, the next generation is in fact anyone coming behind us. Anyone coming behind us. So each and every one of us have someone or a group of people who are coming behind us, be it in age or be it in stage of life. There is someone, a group of people coming along behind us. The other thing we said is, what does a win look like? And we said last week that a win is not, in fact, improving their standard of living. Maybe you didn't grow up with running water as a kid and you want that for your children. And maybe you didn't grow up with a car as a kid and you want that for your children. I'm not against improving your standard of living. What we're saying is that it's not the win. The win is, in fact, providing them a standard for living. And where we found that standard was we looked at a man named Asaph, what he wrote in the book of Psalms. Asaph was a man who spent a lot of time in the court of King David, and he wrote some nuggets for us. And so I want to quickly just dive back into those things. He says that we need to tell the next generation something and to teach the next generation something. He says that we will tell the next generation about the glorious deeds of the Lord, about his power and his mighty wonders. And then he says about this teaching idea, for he issued his laws to Jacob, he gave his instructions to Israel, he commanded our ancestors to teach them to their children. And so he basically says here, hey, we're to do 2 things. We're supposed to tell the next generation about the power, about the deeds and the mighty wonders of God. And then we're meant to teach them the law, the laws and instructions, otherwise known as the commandments, to the next generation. And he says, commanded to our ancestors. That's going to be important in a little bit. Ancestors there, he's talking about the generation of Moses, and that's going to be important for later. So just pack that away, and we'll come back to that in just a little bit. But he says we're supposed to teach and tell them something. And why are we going to teach them and tell them something? He gives us that as well. He says, so that each generation should set its hope anew on God, not forgetting his glorious miracles and obeying his commands. He says that the standard for living that we want to teach the next generation to help them win is that they would trust God, they would not forget his deeds and his miracles and his wonders, and that they would be able to obey his commands. And now that might sound great, right? That sounds like a great thing to help the next generation win. And what's interesting about that is that it's easy when you have a close relationship with someone from the next generation. Whether it's your child, whether it's maybe someone right below you, that you have a close relationship with someone in your family. But what about those situations at work? What about those situations when you're leading a team, you're leading a project, and you've got to work with the next generation? How do we help that generation win when we don't have a commonality? This would also work really easily if you're both followers of Jesus, because we have a common thing there. We've got God in there, we've got his power, his wonders, his mighty deeds that he's performed, the miracles, and his commands. So there's a commonality there of God. But what happens when we're coaching someone in life, or we're coaching someone on the sports field? What happens in those moments? What do we do in those moments? I think it becomes very difficult, and I've definitely experienced this. You get the eager beaver, right? And he rocks up on the scene, and he is all ready to go. He's energetic, and he's enthusiastic, and he's like over here, and he's doing everything that he thinks he needs to be doing, and it has no consequence to the success of the team, right? He's doing everything that he thinks needs to happen, but you're over here. You've done the risk assessment. You've done all the stats. You've been there before. You failed last time. You don't want to fail again. You know what to do. But he's over there, and he's all energetic and enthusiastic, which you need for the success of a team. But how do we not squash that enthusiasm? How do we not squash that energy that he brings to the team? And for some of us, our immediate reaction is we just write him off. We say, where can we put him that he's not going to have too much influence? Or we put him in the outfield. We put him in a position where they're not going to get the ball. We put him in a position where he's not going to be able to influence what is going on as it relates to the team. We try and write him off. But is that helping him win? Is that helping the next generation win? And so what do we do in those moments when we experience that tension, when we experience those things? I think one of the first places that we should start in those moments is that we need to start having empathy. We need to have some empathy for the next generation. We need to be able to see it from their side. We need to know how it feels to be on their side of the fence. You see, people are who they are because of the environments within which they grow up in. People are who they are because of the environments within which they grow up in. Isn't that true? Can we blame Generation X for being cynical of leadership when they grew up during a time in this country when there was apartheid? And there were all these decisions being made as leaders, and everyone was wondering what was going on. Can we blame the millennials, Generation Y, for thinking that they're the best thing since sliced bread because every time they've shown up at an event, we've given them a participation medal or a trophy? Can we blame them? They are the way they are because of the environment within which they have grown up in. And so we need to have empathy. For us to help the next generation win, we need to be able to empathize with them. We need to be able to understand them. We need to be able to see it from their perspective, see it from their side. We need to be able to empathize with that generation. Now, that might be interesting, and you might be wondering, well, how can I do that? There's a social scientist named Tim Elmore, and he writes a book called Generation IY. And he gives these life paradigms for each generation, which I find very helpful. And so I want to share those with you today. It's kind of like a perspective for each generation. And I know it's a general statement, but it's kind of like a life perspective. As people have moved out of high school, out of college, out of university, and they've moved into the working world, this is kind of the perspective of life they bring with us. The first one that he goes into was the first one we looked at last week as we recapped the generations, was the greatest generation. Greatest generation was from 1930 to 1946. They were an amazing generation, but they were very conservative. Their life paradigm is be grateful you have a job. They're conservative, they're thrifty, they save the wrapping paper at Christmas time. They're so cautious in how they live their lives. But they're completely different to the next generation that came along, which was the baby boomers from 1946 all the way through to about 1964. The baby boomers came onto the thing, and all the soldiers came back from war, missed their lady friends, and so there was this boom, 76 million babies born in that period of time. We had a whole bunch of this flood of people, and they felt like they deserved a different life than what their parents had had, than mom and dad had had. And so they have the life paradigm, you owe me, that I'm entitled to a better life than what my parents had. And they kind of experienced a little bit of entitlement that maybe the millennials are exhibiting today. So it swung from caution to this confidence, and it goes all the way back to caution. Ironically, how they're probably the kids of the greatest generation. But Generation X, again, the world was broken. There was all this legislation changing. People were, especially in South Africa, were oppressing South Africa to move away from apartheid. There was a whole bunch of riots and all kinds of things going on between 1964 and about 1985. There was all this change in the world. Around the world, we saw Vietnam. There were a whole bunch of unrest that going on. And the world was broken again. The other thing that played into this generation was that the birth control pill was introduced in the beginning of the 1960s. And so this generation was so much smaller than the baby boomers, the generation before. And so they have this thing, relate to me. The world was broken, and they just wanted an authentic relationship from someone. They wanted that authenticity in a relationship with someone from the next generation or the people around them. That moves on to Gen Y, which is the millennials, and life is a cafeteria. Just as you go to a cafeteria, you've got a tray and a plate, and you kind of move down the line and you choose what you want to be able to have for your meal. They think that life is a buffet, and as they move around, they take a little bit of this, a little bit of that, a little bit of this, and they make up their own plate. We see this all the time. They don't buy CDs anymore, do they? Records? Maybe they buy records now because you've got all vinyl coming out, which is, a big thing again. But they don't buy CDs. They buy a song here, a song there, a song there, and they make up their own playlist. These guys born in the 80s and 90s, they're experiencing a life where they get to go to university not to study something so that they can get a job. They go to study something that they're passionate about. And they make up their own courses by taking a little bit of life science, a little bit of engineering, a little bit of mathematics, a little bit of English and history. They make up whatever they want as they go through. And what's scary about this is that we see this so much in spirituality. These kids are moving into the world, and they go and they say, well, I'm going to take a little bit of Jesus, a little bit of Hinduism, a little bit of Eastern mysticism, a little bit of Oprah, a little bit of Dr. Phil, put it in a pot, mix it all together, and that's my spirituality. We see this all the time. It's very much a mix and match world. They move through life just taking whatever they want. A little bit of it, a little bit of that, and they move through life like that. And that brings us down to Gen Z. Probably anybody born after the year 2000. They have the life paradigm of I'm coping and hoping. After the year 2000, it was very interesting because we were very much more aware of what was happening globally because of our access to information. We were getting a whole bunch more news into our country specifically and able to realize what was going on in the world around us. And the world is a much scarier place since 2000 and 2001. We see daily on the news about terrorist attacks, racial unrest happening around the world, mass shootings, all these things are going on, and it's a scary, scary world. And so this generation is moving through going, I'm hoping and I'm coping. I have to do what I can to try and make it in this world. I have to do everything that is in my power, control what is happening in my life, and rely on myself to be able to get through where this is going. And you might look at that list and think, I think it's definitely helpful, and I hope that you find that list helpful as well as you consider helping the next generation. But you might look at that list and say, well, maybe Gen Y and Gen Z, they just need to be like the rest of us. We'd have no more problems in the world if they just coped like the rest of us. And around the world, that is still what people think. They still think that youth is the problem. But you and I both know that the youth is actually the future, right? That if we're going to help the next generation win, that we want them to be part of the solution. And so it is our responsibility as the older generation to help that generation win. It is our responsibility to help, as the older generation, to help the next generation win. And you might sit there and go, well, why is it up to me? Why is it my responsibility? No one did that for me. No one's done that for me in my life. Why is it my responsibility to help the next generation win? Why is it I coped fine by myself. I went and studied at university. I made my own way in life. Why is it my responsibility? Well, to understand that, we need to kind of go back. And I said to you that we need to just pay attention to that word ancestors about Moses' generation at the beginning. But Asaph writes that, and about 400 to 500 years before Asaph sits down and writes that, something happens in the history of Israel. that I think is relevant to our discussion as it relates to helping the next generation win. See, Moses leads the Israelites out of Egypt, and God performs these amazing miracles and wonders all over the place. He parts the Red Sea and they move across. He provides food and water for them in the desert as they're moving through. And at Mount Sinai, God gives Moses the law and the commandments and says, right, that's how Israel is going to live. And that generation of Moses starts teaching it to their children. And eventually Moses dies and Joshua takes over from Moses. And Joshua leads the people into the promised land. You remember they walked around the walls of Jericho and the city fell, and they were able to have amazing, amazing success through obedience to God. But then what happens, and this happens about 400 years before Asaph writes this, hey? So Joshua dies, and the whole generation dies, and the whole of Israel experienced a tumultuous time in their history. And this generation that happens, that grows up out of this, is often referred to as the lost generation. That there is a lost generation. And this whole description, Joshua dies, this whole generation, it's captured for us in, the writer writes in Judges about what has happened. And he says this, after that whole generation, Joshua's generation, had been gathered to their ancestors, another generation grew up who knew neither the Lord nor what he had done for Israel. It's one generation later. One generation later, an entire generation that does not know God and does not know what he's done for them. That generation does not know about what God, his power, his might, the commands that he gave to them. That generation knows nothing about God, who, in fact, the reason they're in the promised land and where they are is because of the miracles and the deeds that he performed to get them there. An entire generation, one generation it took for them to move from a generation like Joshua, where they experienced amazing success, to this tumultuous history as part of Israel. It's one generation. So this is why this is so important for each and every one of us, to take our responsibility of helping the next generation win so seriously. Because we could be just one generation away from having a generation that is lost, that does not know God and does not know of the things that he has done. And we said that that's the standard for living, that we want to teach the next generation. We're one generation away. You don't believe me? Look at the research. We have a generation at the moment that is moving away from the church, moving away from Jesus, moving away from anything that has to do with what we define as helping the next gen win. They're finding ways on Google, they're finding things on YouTube, they're finding all these mix and match pieces that they're putting together, and they're looking at those things to help them win. And what we have is a group of people moving out into the world, and they have no idea what's going on. You see, the other thing that I find very interesting in life is that maybe you want to consider this as we talk about helping the next generation win. This is the first generation that don't need parents for information. This is the first generation that don't need parents for information. See, 20 plus years ago, if you wanted some information, you asked your parents or you went to the library, right? Maybe some of you might remember Microsoft Encarta on Windows 95, which blew my mind. I love that. Maybe you got the World Books. The people came door to door and they sold to you. Encyclopedia Britannica, some of you remember those as well. Childcraft. Remember Childcraft? I love Childcraft as well. That was a great, great series. But some of us had those resources. But for older generations, they had their parents and teachers. That was it. See, this is the first generation that don't need parents for information, but they do need parents for interpretation. We have a group of people who are getting information from everywhere. There is an inordinate amount of information available to people out there. And what's happening is this generation is hopping onto Google. They're looking at all these things that is going on in their life. They're finding all kinds of information. And they're making their own deductions about what is going on. Some of us in this room have made some healthy decisions about how to interpret that information in a way that helps us win. But the next generation doesn't have those tools yet. And so they're sitting there wondering, what's going on? And they're getting things from YouTube, they're getting things from their friends that have been passed around, they're making their own conclusions about what is going on in their lives and in the world around them. This is the first generation that doesn't need parents for information, but they need us for interpretation. And so I don't know about you, but I don't want to see a lost world, a lost generation. I don't want to see a group that's walking away from the church, walking away from what we might think is valued in life. I don't want to see a lost generation. And I don't know what Joshua did in those times to not do, or what he did or did not do for the next generation. Clearly, they didn't tell the next generation about God, and clearly they didn't tell and get them to know God and His commands. But I do know that there are 4 things that we're doing culturally at the moment that are not setting the next generation up for a win. There are 4 things, and I'll go through them in a couple of minutes. The first one there is parenting. And I'm not, these aren't my words, but psychologists look at how we're parenting our kids and raising the next generation at the moment, and they're saying that we're using failed parenting strategies. What we're seeing is a generation growing up where they're told they're special all the time. They're told that they can have anything they want right now just because they want it. We have a generation coming through that they got into a class or a sports team not because they deserved it, but because their parents complained. We have a group of students coming through who got A's in class, not because they earned it, but because the teachers didn't want to deal with the parents. And if you're an educator, you know what that feels like. Tim Elmore, again, summarizes 4 things that we do as failed parenting strategies. And he says this. He says that the first one is we risk too little. Some of the things that you and I grew up playing on or playing with, merry-go-rounds, jungle gyms, all those things were fun for us, right? But they're now deemed dangerous. So we put baby on board signs up in our cars. We try and take every precaution. We kind of put helmets on whenever they walk out the door. We want to protect them at any cost we can. But what psychologists are determining are those things, those risks that they take, those things that they learn in those moments, what's actually happening is they're developing skills, motor skills, that are going to help them move out of the house. Any parents want their children to move out of the house? Nervous laughter, I think. When they want to ask someone to get to be for a marriage, when they move through navigating a job, they need to learn those skills, and those skills come down to taking risks in a safe environment. The other thing we do is we rescue too quickly. How many parents, when the child's left their sports bag or their homework or the project at home, we rush home, grab that, rush it off to the school, instead of teaching our children responsibility? They need to learn to be responsible in that age, because one day you're not going to be able to rescue them when they don't prepare for an exam. You're not going to be able to rescue them when they go out and they are late for a deadline. The third thing we need, the failed parenting strategy we do, is we rave too easily. Now, I'm not against raving about your kids. Please go and encourage your children. We want to do that. That is a good parenting skill to have. You want to encourage your kids. But self-esteem is not built only on affirmation. Self-esteem is built on affirmation and achievement. It is built on affirmation and achievement. We need to let our kids achieve things in life so that they develop a healthy balance of self-esteem, both affirmation and they have some achievement in life as well. And the last one on the list here is we reward too frequently. Just giving a child a trophy for showing up doesn't help them. It might work at age 3 to avoid a tantrum. It doesn't work at age 9 or 10. What we're doing is we're letting this group of teenagers, this group of people, go out into the world, and they're told they're special all the time. They're told that they can get anything they want when they want it. And what's happening is they're realizing they're not as special as their mom told them. They can't get everything they want. Mom and dad cannot get them a promotion, and that you get nothing for coming in last place. And so we have this entire generation moving out there who have experienced 2 things from parents, either abundance or abandonment. And that's not my words, those are psychologists who work in those environments. Abandonment and abandonment. We're either doing too much or we're doing too little for our kids. And so our failed parenting strategies are leaving this group coming out into the working world with this high amount of arrogance because they have so many friends on Facebook, they've got so many likes, they've got this platform that they've developed, but they have a very low self-esteem, and they walk into a world where they are not as special as their mom told them, and they get nothing for coming in last place. And suddenly their self-esteem is broken, and their self-confidence is down to 0. The second thing that we do as kind of failed strategies that we're doing culturally is technology. Technology is a big thing. And honestly, we live in a Facebook and Instagram world where we put a filter on everything, don't we? And everything just looks amazing, and meanwhile we're depressed. We sit at home and we go through life and we seem like, hey, I'm tough, I have it all figured out. That's what I'm posting on social media, when in actual fact, very few people have toughness in their life and very few people have it all figured out. We know from studies that engagement with social media releases a chemical in our brain called dopamine. This is a little science. Bear with me. But it releases this chemical in your brain called dopamine, and that's why when you get a text, it feels good. It's when you get a like on Facebook or Instagram or social media, it gives you a little rush. It's why we go to those things that we want in those moments. It's why when we go back to that post and see how it's doing, I've only got 10 likes. Why have I only got 10 likes? I wonder why. I wonder if there's something wrong with me, or maybe these people don't like me anymore. It releases dopamine in the brain. A man named Brad Huddleston coined the term digital cocaine because dopamine is the exact same chemical released in the brain when you smoke, when you drink alcohol, and when you gamble. It's the exact same chemical that is happening in the brain, which means it's highly addictive. And here's a scary thought for you. Brad Huddleston has determined that if you let your child play video games for 1 hour, it's the same as your child snorting a line of cocaine. That's pretty scary. It's the same chemical, the same release of chemical, and the same amount of chemical of dopamine running in the brain. Why is that important? Well, what's happening in the world is that our teenagers are finding that dopamine is the thing that they're going to. You see, when we're going through adolescence, before adolescence, all we need is the approval of our parents, don't we? But when we go through adolescence, we need the approval of our peers, the people around us. And what's happening is when we're going to that social media and we're not feeling so great, we're going to the device because it's giving us the release of dopamine. See, alcoholics maybe stumble across alcohol during their teenage years. And what they suddenly realize is that alcohol releases dopamine in their brain and it gives them that numbing feeling during their adolescent years. And what's happening is that they're hardwiring that in their brain that when they experience stress in life, when they can't cope, they don't go to a person for help, they go to the bottle. That's science. And what we're doing by giving our kids all these cell phones and all this access, unlimited access to social media, is we're basically saying that, hey, there's a numbing tool that you can use to cope with stress in life. You see, there are age restrictions on smoking, there are age restrictions on gambling, there are age restrictions on drinking. But there are very few age restrictions on cell phones and on social media, for very good reason for the other things. Not so great when it comes to social media and on cell phones. So what we're basically doing to our kids is leaving the liquor cabinet wide open and saying, kids, help yourselves. Because what's happening is in their teenage years, they're developing this coping mechanism that when they feel stressed, they go to that device that releases the dopamine in their mind. They have that experience of numbingness happening in their life, and they're going there all the time. And when that numbness wears off, they go to Google, and they Google what's wrong with them. They Google what's happening, and they get all this information that they have no one to interpret it with because they're not going to parents for information. They're going back to the device because they want some more dopamine. And so it's a vicious cycle that has been hardwired in their brains during adolescence, that instead of going to people for help, they're going to the device. This is important because you and I, even though we did not grow up, many of us, with technology, we're modeling bad habits for the next generation. They're not developing coping mechanisms to handle stress when they get stress. But some of us are modeling bad habits, and we need to put the phone down when we play with our kids. We need to have no phone zones. Maybe the dinner table. Maybe there's an entire day that there is no phone around in those moments. There are apps available for parents that you can turn your kid's cell phone completely off. You have an agreement that you can manage that with them. You need to teach kids to not use the phone in the car. That when you're driving, one, you're teaching them a great habit that they shouldn't text and drive. They shouldn't be on their phone during the car. The other thing you're doing is you're teaching them how to have a conversation with someone. You're teaching them how to develop those social skills to have a relationship, that they be comfortable with silence. You're teaching them valuable skills by taking technology out of the equation. Now, don't get me wrong, social media and cell phones are not bad. It's the imbalance that is the problem. And you and I have the responsibility as the older generation to help them cope, to help them win, to develop decent ways of being able to deal with stress as they move through life. Teenagers will tell you that they need to rely on their friends, but because of this dopamine that's going on, they have no deep, meaningful relationships with their friends. Then, in fact, they know that they can have fun with their friends, but the moment something better comes up, they're going there and they're going to ditch you in that moment. We need to help them cope with the stresses of life. And part of that is trying to help them find a balance between technology and life, between technology and reality, and help them interpret those moments. The third thing there on this list is impatience. We live in a world where it's instant gratification. If you want something, you want to buy something, you go and Take A Lot, you order it, pay for overnight shipping, and it's on your doorstep the next day, right? You want to watch a movie, you want to watch a series, you just log onto your internet, you just find whatever you want to watch and you watch it. You don't have to go through the artist process of making sure it's playing at your local cinema, what time it's showing, who's going to get lifts, how are we going to pay for it, am I going to buy popcorn or Coke when I get there, what's that all about? We're not developing the social skills to be able to deal with those things. If you want to go on a date, there's nothing that helps you with those social skills saying, hey, how's it going? Do you like me? Do you mean yes? No? Yes? I'm not understanding this right now. You just swipe right on an app and you're a stud. You're good to go. You're not learning the social mechanisms, the social coping mechanisms to be able to deal with life, to have these deep, meaningful relationships. Everything is instant and you can have anything you want when you want it. But we need to teach them how to interpret those things. The other thing with impatience, Simon Sinek uses this great example. He uses an illustration of a mountain. And he says that this generation's coming out and they see the summit as their goal. They want to move towards the summit. That's kind of where they're heading towards. That's the goal. That's what they want to do. That's their impact in life. And they're standing at the foot of the mountain looking up and they're like, that's where I want to go. That's where I want to be. But they don't see the mountain. And he says that it doesn't matter if you climb up the mountain fast or you climb down the mountain fast or how quickly or slowly you go up that mountain. The truth is we have to help them see the mountain. Because what's happening in our generation is that they're going up the mountain, they fall off the mountain, or they're going up too slowly and they're blaming themselves. They're in those moments going, there's something wrong with me because I should be there already. They don't see the mountain and wondering why it's taking me so long to get there, and they're blaming themselves. And they move from job to job to job, trying to find something where they're going to be able to reach that impact. Meanwhile, they're going to climb the same mountain at the next job, and they're never going to be able to get there. We need to teach them how to have patience. This is one of the main reasons why we're seeing an increase in suicide rates, why we're seeing an increase in drug overdoses, and why we're seeing an increase in kids leaving school because of bouts of depression. Unheard of in previous generations. We're seeing an increase of this because there's this thing that they look internally and saying, there's something wrong with me. And when I Google the symptoms, I'm done, I've got something. I don't know what's going on with me. I don't understand what's happening. They don't have the social coping mechanisms for stress. And so this generation is growing up in these environments where they can't cope with stress, they don't know how to develop the social skills, and they are impatient in those moments. The last one on the list here is environment, and this one's a really quick one. But we're releasing a workforce into the world, out of university, into the workforce where we care more about the bottom line than we do about the person. This generation grew up experiencing all of these other things, and we're not giving them the coping mechanisms. We're not teaching them how to have confidence, how to develop a skill set. We're not teaching them how to be able to, collaborate with the people around them, how to work on a team, how to make sure that I'm going to start something today, and if it doesn't finish in a month, I just need to keep going. That if I don't finish within a year, that I'm building towards something. And there is fulfillment in life. We need to teach the next generation that the things that are actually worthwhile in life actually take time to develop, like a skill set, job satisfaction. We need to be able to push that generation in that. And it is your and my responsibility to help the next generation win. Because when they win, we win as well. And you look at that list, and that list might kind of seem like down and out. Like this might be a complete downer on helping the next generation win, but that's the culture we live in. That's the culture of what's happening at the moment. We're seeing a group of people who are working and they haven't got a good balance between digital and what's happening in real life. We've got a group of people who are moving out there and thinking if it doesn't happen now, there's something wrong with me. And we need to help them build confidence. We need to help them realize that the things that matter in life, like love and joy and self-confidence and a skill set and job fulfillment, those things take time. They are hard work. And so I don't know about you, but I don't want to see a next generation lost. If we look at what happened to Joshua's generation, they were one generation away from losing an entire generation. I want to help the next generation win, and I hope that you would want to do that as well. And I hope that we would take the responsibility of that quite seriously. But what can we do? How can we help this next generation win? If they're facing all these things, what are some things that maybe we can do to be able to help that generation win? What are some of the things that we can take seriously, the responsibility we have to help the next generation win? We can do three things. One of the things that we do so often is we want to control, hey? Don't we want to control? If something goes wrong, we want to swoop in, we want to take control of the situation, but honestly, control is a myth. None of us have control. We want to control every situation that is available out there. So I want to say to you, don't think control, think connect. What we need to do is we need to try and find ways that we can have heart connections with the next generation, that we can start listening to them, that we can start asking them questions, finding out what is happening in their world and understanding what's happening in their lives. You see, because when you do that, when you find a connection, when you connect with the next generation, you might not have control, but you're going to have a lot more influence in that person's life. You're going to be able to help them win as they navigate what is happening in life. Don't think control, think connect. The second thing is don't think rules, think equations. And I forgot to ask you to just do one thing for the next generation, that would be it. We all know that in life there are a few rules, but the majority of them are equations. That if you do this, that's the benefit. If you do that, that's the consequence. We go through life and there's a whole bunch of equations. In fact, if you want to work out one of the equations are, don't pay your rent or your mortgage this month, that's an equation. If we teach children how to navigate life, the equations of life, we might be able to help them win in those moments. Don't think rules, think equations. Some of them are simple. You play with fire, you're going to get burnt. Some of them are a little more complicated. You sow what you reap, that there is a long-term benefit, long-term goal in these moments. Don't think rules, think equations. And the last one here is don't think lecture, think lab. Now, I don't know about you, but when someone does something wrong or there's something going wrong, all I want to do is get in with a lecture, right? When my daughter does something wrong, she misbehaves, I want to just get in with a lecture. Lectures are fine when you're learning something in a classroom-style environment. Lectures are not fine when you're trying to walk alongside someone and help them navigate life. So next time you want to try and lecture someone, maybe you want to think about a lab. And you might remember what a science or biology lab was. It was a safe place for you to be able to do experiments in. It was a safe place for you to be able to live in life and experiment what was going on. And so we need to be able to create labs for people where they can move in and they can say, hey, I want to experiment with my gifts and talents. I want to see what's going on. I want to try and serve in a way that is healthy. I want to meet some new people. I want to develop those social skills in a controlled environment. I maybe want to try and find a mentor, someone who is not my parents, who can help me navigate through this life. And I think that those are the three things that we could help the next generation win as we consider the world that they're in. Don't think control, think connect. Don't think rules, think equations. Don't think lecture, think lab. This is important for each and every one of us because honestly, and I don't know about you, I don't want to lose another generation. I don't want to lose the next generation. But what I would love to do is be able to leave this world knowing that the next generation is going to be able to help be able to win. Why is that important? Because if the world gets better, everyone wins. And if the next generation is able to win, and they're able to be able to move out into the world, and the world is a better place, then we've won as a generation. We've left that legacy for people to be able to experience a better life along the way. But that starts with you, and that starts with me. It starts with our responsibility we have as the older generation to help the next generation win. The responsibility is each and every one of us to be able to help that generation win. So I hope that as you move out of here today, you're not going to go try and control the next generation. You're going to try and connect with them. That as you move out of here, you're not going to think about rules and putting down those rules. You're going to think about the equations in life that you can teach that next generation. That you're not going to think about lecturing, that you're going to think about a lab, putting them into a safe environment, a safe context, maybe take them on a mission trip somewhere where they can experience what serving in that environment might be like. The responsibility is on the older generation to help the next generation win. It's up to us to help them find a healthy balance between digital and real life. It's up to us to help build their self-confidence as they move through life and understand that they're not going to a device when they need help, that they're coming to a person. Help them develop deep, meaningful relationships. The responsibility is on you, and the responsibility is on me. Because if they win, we win in the process as well. Let me pray for us. Heavenly Father, just thank you that we can come into an environment like this, that we can talk about a topic that not many people deal with, but we all experience. Father, that we interact with people, whether it be at work, whether it just be in the supermarket, whether we walking through life, even with our own kids. Father, we experience those people who are in the next generation. And Father, I pray for the people here today, and they're writing this off as kind of like, hey, this is just a Gen Z, a millennial thing. Father, the truth is that each and every one of us knows someone who has walked away from you. We all know people who have moved away from you, that they're a lost generation. And Father, they're our friends and they're our family. And Father, if we're going to help the next generation win, I pray that we would be able to help them have a confidence, help them find a balance between digital and real life. Father, that we would help them and put them in environments where we can connect with them, that we would be able to help them win. Father, it is our responsibility, and we don't take that lightly. But Father, I pray that you give us the wisdom to know what to do and the courage to ultimately go out and do those things that you have called us to do. That we'd raise the next generation confident that they can put their trust in you, that they would obey your commands, because, Father, you're offering us a life full with joy, hope, love. And Father, that they would not forget the wonderful deeds and miracles that you have done, especially through your Son, Jesus. We thank you for him, and it's in his name we pray. Amen.